The new 8 o'clock on CNN. Parker Spitzer, weeknights on CNN.
Ralph, let's come back to the numbers for a minute, because even if I were to agree, which I don't, that your cuts came to $2 trillion a year, what you also do is extend the Bush tax cuts for the rich, which then reduces revenue by $4 trillion over the next 10 years, which is why all the analysts who've looked at your document say that it increases the federal deficit by $1.5 trillion over the next decade, which is why David Frum, a very respected conservative voice, he's an icon in the conservative world, he said the document is a repudiation of the central foundational idea behind the Tea Party. The Pledge to America declares, sorry, we don't believe this. I hate to say it, the numbers don't add up because you haven't specified a single cut. I'm not talking about slowing the rate of increase, a single cut in Social Security, Medicaid, or Medicare. And as we all know, and we've been saying this to the public, that's where the money is. So what are you going to do to slow the rate of increase in Medicare, the single largest piece of the entitlement system? Medicare specifically, what are you going to do?
Well, at the risk of stating the obvious, Elliot, that's not going to be done except on a bipartisan basis.
Happy to do it on a bipartisan basis.
Sure, but having said that, I think we have to move to a model where, as at some state levels with regard to Medicaid expansion or Medicaid spending, the program is allowed to take place in the form of Medicare recipients buying insurance policies on the private market, as has taken place in Medicare Advantage, and private companies competing for that dollar. Medicare Part D, Elliot, which is the prescription drug benefit, that monthly premium came in 40% below what the Congressional Budget Office originally projected. Why? Because companies competed for that dollar. They wanted that business. And that's the problem with traditional one-size-fits-all Medicare. I'm the son of an MD who's an ophthalmologist in rural North Georgia, where half of his practice was Medicare and Medicaid, and they set his rate. If the patients were empowered so that they were chasing the docs and the nurses and the hospitals instead of the government, we could greatly balance that program.
I just want to understand, because we're trying to get answers. What you're saying is privatize Medicare.
I didn't say that.
No, but that's really what you're saying. You're saying let people opt out, and let people opt out the same way you wanted to privatize Social Security. I'm just trying to explain it so people can understand this.
Yeah, what I suggested was that you could do a model for Medicare as a whole similar to Medicare Part D or Medicare Advantage, where people pay premiums and they can choose what kind of policy they want. So you give the recipients a choice, and instead of offering everybody a Cadillac, you give them different things they can choose from, and they decide whether or not they want to pay an additional premium.
Do you agree, though, with what I said before, that since I totaled and accepted your number for the cuts you said you were suggesting over the next 10 years, and then netted out against that the impact of the tax cuts that you're also extending into the next decade, the impact on the budget of the Pledge to America increases the deficit by about $1.5 to $2 trillion over the next decade? That's simple arithmetic based on the numbers you gave me.
No, I don't agree with that, and that's the same kind of static, green-eye shade accounting that has led to every evaluation of every tax cut over the last 50 years, going back, by the way, to the John F. Kennedy tax cuts in the 60s, saying that they were going to lead to less revenue rather than more revenue. Ronald Reagan had the deepest and broadest tax cuts in the post-World War II period. The amount of revenue that came in off those lower rates was double what it was 8 years earlier.
Ralph?
In the case of George W. Bush, we were told the same thing would happen. His last budget before the slowdown of 2008 was about $175 billion, which is a rounding error in a $14 trillion economy. So I don't agree. And even when Jimmy Carter, by the way, cut the capital gains tax rate in 1978, more revenue came in on capital gains on the lower rate than came in under the high rate.
That's because there is certain growth which is already built into these models. I'm just doing arithmetic. You say you're cutting spending by 2, but then you're reducing tax revenue by 4. 4 minus 2 means we're going to have less revenue in the amount of -2 in addition to the deficits we've already got. This is simple arithmetic. I mean, what's wrong with those numbers?
Well, what's wrong with those numbers is, as I understand your proposal and as I understand the Obama administration's proposal, it is on January 1st, they want to increase taxes on everybody making over $250,000 a year.
Let's keep the subject, your proposal, which is you're cutting spending by 2. You say, I'll accept that number, but you're reducing revenue by 4.
Elliot,
you
it's a
reduce
very
revenue by 4 and
it's a
spending
very
by 2, you're still
simple
2 in
it's
the
a
hole.
very simple choice. We either allow tax rates to go up on January 1 or we don't.
No,
You're
Ralph,
for them going up.
No, I'm not.
I'm for
Ralph,
keeping them where
Ralph,
they are
I'm
in the
taking
deepest
your
and
numbers.
longest recession since World War II.
But the impact of extending the tax cuts as you want to do it is a loss of revenue of $4 trillion, but you're only cutting $2 trillion on the spending side. 4 minus 2 is 2. That's all I'm saying.
Well, that's your math. I haven't subscribed
You're right,
to it.
Ralph. That is my math, and I'll stick with those numbers
No.
any day. If you want to teach me a new math, I'm game.
All I know is this. Under the kind of policies that you advocate, we've had the 2 largest back-to-back deficits in American history. I rest my case.
Okay, well, and that's because George Bush
So
left
if we
us
want
with an
more,
economy that was
more of that,
just booming.
then we want a Democratic
All right.
Congress and
Okay.
Obama for another 4 years.
4 minus 2, we'll leave the answer to Ralph when he comes back. He'll figure it out.
Okay, Ralph, I'm going to just try to reel things back in a little bit here to just politics. Can you talk a little bit about the midterm elections? How do you think the Tea Party candidates are going to do?
I think they're going to do extremely well. I think Ken
you just
Buxton-
heard why.
Yes, I think we did just hear why. And by the way, the Democratic candidates, Pelosi and Obama, made them all walk the plank on the stimulus, on taxpayer-funded bailouts, on higher taxes, on Obamacare. And frankly, it's killing them from coast to coast. And I think not only is Marco Rubio going to win in Florida going away, I think Joe Miller is going to win in Alaska, Ken Buck in Colorado, Rand Paul in Kentucky. I think Sharon Angle is going to win in Nevada, and I think a whole
So
lot
how
of
many
others
Senate
will win.
seats is that, Ralph?
Well, I'm not really in the prediction business. I think if you look at the handicappers right now in Washington, they would say 7 to 8. But I don't really. I think midterm turnout is so hard to call.
Yeah.
That I think it's. Let me put it to you this way. I think both chambers are in play, and I think it's entirely possible that you're going to have a Republican House and a Republican Senate.